Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. This is the day that the Lord has made, and we are rejoicing and being glad in it. I'm certainly delighted that you thought it not robbery to be able to come forth and spend yet another Tuesday evening with us as we discuss civics. I won't tap my own shoulders, but as it turns out, now everybody's having civics. But we've been doing it, and that's why we're at Civics 301. It's a class where we are called to participate in a discussion. This is not a lecture. So if you know somebody who wants to discuss some of the facts, some of the cutting edge issues, I encourage you to be able to encourage them to come. I encourage you to encourage them to be able to come in and participate even in our discussion, even right now, as we prepare to start our class. Class is in session. Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father and our Mother, we thank you for life and giving it to us abundantly. We pray now for your grace and mercy upon us as we seek to explore the topics even of this day and what allows us to be able to operate together even as citizens. In your name we pray. Amen. So certainly thankful for each of you who think it not robbery to be able to participate even in our class. So today, like I said, as we try to find our sea legs in terms of not trying to, I don't want to be a current events class. I want to be a civics class. And so what I want to try to do is to explore current events through the aspect of civics. And in that event, what we want to do today, I had took the whole time last week to put a whole outline together. Nobody followed it. So now what I want to do is to just begin to bring forth 4 critical questions. If we get to all 4, that's fine. But to certainly start with I think we can get through 2. And I think they're deep, particularly as we approach Black History Month, because I'm looking to do something special in Black History Month where we'll do more lecture style instead of conversational style to be able to share for some things. But what I want to talk about today for those who are willing to participate, and we'll go as long as the Lord allows, on 4 questions. But the first question is, serious question. Why are white people afraid of Black history? That's my question. And I need you to help me. I got answers, but the point is, remember, as I said on Sunday, this isn't 101. This isn't white people are afraid of Black history because that's what a 101 class is. A 301 asks why, so it empowers you. Anybody wish to chime in? So I'll let you get ready. The reason why I asked this question, why are white people so afraid of Black history, is you all aware that the next Republican nominee, we call him Donald Trump light, Ron DeSantis of Florida, the governor of Florida, second term governor of Florida, and you of a big state like that, you're automatically a presidential contender. And yet, as this governor sought to do things, again, had different COVID rules. And now when it comes to AP, meaning college courses that you can take while you're in high school, you can take AP Latin, you can take AP Asian history, you can take AP geometry. You can take AP biology. You can take AP Asian culture. It makes no difference. But yet he decided, or his committee, the people whom he appointed, who answers to him, that having an AP African American studies course was not acceptable. But at this time, meaning you guys can come back and change it. And so, like, what symbol is that sending to us? That being able to study our history is so detrimental, but yet it so rewards him. Because you and I know, and we joke, Pastor Lacey can come up here and you make sure Pastor Lacey don't say certain things. Because we say certain things, we might have a problem. But why is there never a problem when you stomp on Black people?
Well, a big reason white people are so afraid of Black history being really taught or even perceived is because not only does it come with the empowerment of a race that they've always tried to keep down, it comes with them having to acknowledge their historical wrongs that they have brought upon a group of people. And throughout the government and throughout school, throughout work environments, everything, white people are even subconsciously trying to keep Black people below with this like glass wall. And if they're educated on where they come from, on their achievements, etc., that glass wall will weaken and it'll be harder to keep Black people contained.
My God, y'all, Lily just got a 90 on a physics, but she knows something about history. I'm telling you, I don't know what to say next because you completely answered the question. I mean, but I'm gonna allow everybody else just dance around it. But Lily, you absolutely hit it. And we can stay around there. And the Bible says that a child shall lead them, is what Lily has revealed to us, is that the reason why Black history is not, the reason why white people are afraid of Black history, because it points toward them. That's the point. And just even look at this cultural appropriation. The damn bill is called some type of woke act. We ain't even using woke. If you say woke, you might as well say groovy. I mean, it just lets you know how behind the scenes and the times that this is, but it's all code speak, but afraid to admit that you harmed me. That's, you are the rapist. And you mad that the one that is raped is calling you a rapist and that there's something wrong with them? That's a big deal that we have to deal with as we try to articulate white guilt. Deacon Beckwith.
Okay, I'm gonna put it like this. I think really it's because they're afraid of blackness, really. And I'm gonna actually use today's events as a reference point. Oscar nominations came out this morning. Viola Davis, spectacular performance in The Woman King, snubbed. Danielle Detweiler, outstanding performance in Till, snubbed. I mean, Woman King, I don't think really Till didn't get nominated for anything.
Watch, and you Beckwith, I love what you're going, and I didn't even prepare to that, but I did see, but yet a reboot of Top Gun gets nominated. Ain't nothing spectacular about Top Gun. If the first one didn't get nominated, what makes you think the second one got better? They all got older.
And all that Top Gun did was support horrible double standards for aging in America.
Oh, say more, Fanta, please.
Well, with the lead actress who knew she wouldn't even be invited back, the one who was counter Tom Cruise the first time.
Right.
And it's not to say that the young woman who played counter him is a young one, but she's one who stands behind, getting a lot of work to stay in this image of youth and no one age. Like, it's BS. This is
Okay. I like that. I like that. And what's happening, that's very good. Thank you. And that's what's happening. When you look at the governor of Florida, still ties back into everything he's saying. What they're hating is intersectionality. Intersectionality is how you combine race, gender, ageism, and how all these things come to a confluence. That's really what they're mad at. And guess what? Sometimes they can get us involved in it too. But that's really what it is like, wow, really?
Another point, when they got us involved with women's rights, like Black women haven't been working since the dawn of time.
That is correct. And so even when you look at the March on Washington, to think that queer people do not have anything to do with the success of our nation, again, Bayard Rustin was the mastermind behind the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. Very, very much. Now, whether you say it's good or bad, and they knew he was gay, and the FBI knew he was gay, but what King asked him to do was to take a back. Can you run it from the back? Because what he's trying to do is to move something. We can look at it any way you want to, but the fact is the way you have that is because of Rustin. That's what you had, that successful march. King was not a strategist to be able to plan like that. King was a speech giver, and he gave a great speech. But Bayard Rustin was able to articulate how do you get X, Y, and Z done in this particular regard. Lily.
Earlier, my mom said something about women's rights. I wanted to go back to that because often in history books, they don't really tell you about when feminism first came around, how Black women weren't like included in when white women would like protest for feminism and stuff. When they would, there was this letter that a white woman feminist leader gave to a politician that was like, oh, if you want to keep segregation and if you want to keep all of this stuff, allow white women to vote, and we'll make sure it stays that way. White people never really had Black people in mind when they were building up themselves. So obviously they would want to keep it that way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the same thing with the framers of the Constitution. I'm going to look up where the person that you're talking about, I think I'm familiar with it. And that's something to always be in there. Hence, when Sojourner Truth gave her great famous speech, Ain't I a Woman, to be able to talk about those type of concerns. Nehemiah, Minister Young.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Sorry not to be on video, I'm driving. But I wanted to just tag on to a little bit about what everyone said and go back to your question about the AP studies, because this issue, it really bothers me that we're in a time when still in 2023 now, where we can't teach critical race theory in our schools. And I think that it goes back to exactly what Lily was saying and what you were saying, is that the framers of the Constitution and the founders of the United States, they never had Black people in mind when they were writing about their freedom and liberation that they wanted from who they felt were oppressing them, right? The British. And so here we are all these years later, and it's still the same predicament that we are. I think, if we think back to 1600s, 1700s, even then, white folks were the minority, even though they had the power. In many cases, in many states, we outnumbered them. And I think even now, they're afraid of being erased. Not only do they not want Black folks to learn about their own history, but they don't want other races to learn about Black history either. Because the truth is that there's more people in the United States and there's more people around the world who identify with the oppression of Black folks, and the experience of having white people's foots on your necks. And I think that history not only empowers Black people, but it also unites colored people, people of color all over the world, and other nations who feel oppressed by the United States and by white imperialism.
I love your last word, imperialism, white imperialism. That's a big word, colonialism and imperialism, to think about what those things meant in the 20th century, 18th, 19th, and 20th century, and technically even the 21st century. Nehemiah, I'm going to challenge you just on one point, and I always do this to everybody, is that critical race theory is not taught in high school, nor is it taught in college. Critical race theory is a theory that's taught only in law school. So we don't buy into their language. Don't let them conflate that. They don't want us to talk Black history. But critical race theory is it is a legal form. That's kind of like thinking, and I want us to really think about this, because I will always correct anybody, is that we got math, and then you got geometry, then you got algebra, and then you got physics, which is a form of math, which literally we were talking about earlier. Those are still a higher level. And so we don't want to conflate them. And that's the language that they got us doing, saying that critical race theory is being taught in elementary school. No, critical race theory ain't being taught in elementary school. It's not being taught in middle school. It's not being taught in high school. It's not being taught in the greatest colleges, because it is a law school course, because critical theory by definition deals with the law. And so that's the point. I want us to see that, but that's what DeSantis, in Florida, they conflated Black history to be equated with critical race theory. They can be, I mean, wow. How can I say they can be part of the same, but they're not the same.
No, and I love that. Thank you for that clarification, and also making that distinction, because there is a difference between just teaching Black history and teaching a critical race theory.
Right?
Isn't DeSantis against AP African American studies being taught?
Yes, that's what we started with. Yes,
right.
indeed.
Right. So
but it stems from his woke bill. What we joked about. He using woke. White folk using woke. He might as well say bill. I mean, who the hell says woke? But he's using that bill started first, and this now is in response to the bill in there to say, and really ironically, what we want to understand, he's really not necessarily attacking Black history. He's attacking the course's intersectionality that links queer and Black people together. That's what he's attacking.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I want y'all. Did y'all hear what I just said? He don't mind you talking about Harriet Tubman, but what he doesn't want you to talk about is that Harriet Tubman would be fighting for LGBT or queer community. No, that's not so. That's not so. That's the point. He's really against the intersectionality. That's really what it is, first and foremost, because he's homophobic. Then secondly, he's a nationalist. So in that regard, I want us to, can y'all react to that when I'm talking? Are you all aware what this term intersectionality and how powerful it is and what it means? Anybody? I'll tell you.
Never really thought it covered that much before. I never really gave it any thought, to be honest.
Well, see, here's the point. Intersectionality primarily is driven by women that have first called it, but just because you named it doesn't mean it didn't happen before. So when I think about intersectionality, I think about what Huey P. Newton was doing. I mean, not Huey, Chicago, Black Panther.
Fred Hampton.
What Fred Hampton was doing in Chicago was that he was getting the gangs together, he was getting the working poor, he was getting the whites and getting the Latinos together. And so therefore, he showed how they all were interconnected to have a movement. And what white supremacy knows is you don't want all of these other things that you are against to come together. And so therefore, when you talk about Blacks, Latinos, white poor, and the queer community coming together, hell, that's the whole world. All that's left is white men and white women that protect, or watch this. Now watch this, DeSantis, the new word is cape. And white women that cape for white men. Damn, that's good.
Just to go back for a second, where you mentioned, oh my gosh, brain freeze.
Hampton or
oh my gosh, I'll come back to it.
okay. But yeah, but so that's the point to be, again, let's be clear. And whether you call it a Republican or a Democrat, I don't care what party it is. What I want to let you know is that white men have never voted for the party for full rights since 1968 as a majority. And it turns out that now that's Democrats, but mine is because some of us can say, yeah, you know, Democrats did this, that. But all I'm just saying is white men have never in this country since 1968, when we actually had the full rights to be able to vote, have ever voted for a candidate that was for everybody voting. Since 1968, primarily the Republican Party, Democrats participated in it to an extent, is to be able to cut the votes back. And that's a reality. And so, again, I love in a short term is that why are white people afraid of Black history? Because Black history challenges white supremacy. It challenges it. And watch this, it challenges, watch this, whether you are a liberal or a conservative. Because again, the way Lily had said it in the beginning, it turns a mirror onto you. I mean, we didn't enslave ourselves. Think about this. Think about all the atrocities that are afforded upon us. And yet when we turn around, every time we turn around, they talk about Black on Black crime. Now, we just had 2 shootings in California. Are they talking about, wow, Asian on Asian crime is on the rise?
Most white mass shootings is white people killing white people. They ain't calling them
white on white. They're not saying that. It's a misnomer to be able to say that. But when we began to look at that stuff, and I don't know if you all remember the 80s with Ron Dellums and Maxine Waters. And remember, they were talking about the FBI bringing in drugs in the South Central. And we thought that they were crazy. And it turned, our whole crack epidemic was financed over with Oliver North and President Ronald Reagan, Iran-Contra affair. That's why it's important to know history when you start seeing these particular facts. They brought those drugs in our community, and then it created an arrest complex that had us all arrested. But now you got an opioid crisis, and now you want to send doctors, but not the police. Those are challenges, and so that white supremacy shines the light on the radicals who think we ain't nothing and want to pretend like it's not. But on the liberals who actually want to say, but it wasn't me. Lacey, I didn't enslave your people. I'm nice to you. Why we got to see this stuff? But yet we can watch Schindler's List and you can begin to talk about how bad Hitler is without any problem. Lily, go ahead, baby. I'm glad you participated.
I wanted to mention how, in the end, racism in America isn't always inherently about race. in the end, it's America's all wrapped around money. It's all about keeping money, giving it to the people who already have it, and keeping it away from the people who don't. That's why they target Black people for drugs and crimes, etc. If they're in prison, they can't make money, they can't earn anything. The white people can stay on top while they keep minorities at the bottom, where it's easier to just make sure that it's just a circulation of wealth, and they keep the people outside of the circle forever outside of the circle.
I love my daughter. And watch this. And what Lily has now dropped on you all, I'm about to drop something on you all that I guarantee none of you all will know right now, except for Lily. The most unique thing about the American Revolution is that the revolution was taken care of by the wealthy. You missed what I said. The American Revolution was not led by the poor, was not led by slaves. American Revolution was led by wealthy landowners. Hence, when they freed themselves from Great Britain or from England, what they wanted to do was to inculcate laws that gave them landholders greater rights. Most revolutions, indeed all revolutions, except for this one, took place from those who were at the bottom. It was middle-class people, in that system, wealthy people that George was squeezing, and they said, you ain't squeezing us no more. We're thousands of miles away from you. We're going to now create our own country. This is not like the French Revolution. It's not like the Italian Revolution or the Russian Revolution, where when you so poor that you have to, they fight back. No, these people were well off, and they were friends of George, but decided that they had to be able to change. And what they wanted to do was to inculcate their wealth. And their wealth was tied to land, and that process still exists today. Chris, and then Minister Young.
Okay, now this is going back a little bit toward part of the conversation we were talking about getting everybody together in Chicago. Could it possibly be, and I think I actually have this theory now, because going back to Memphis, it's specifically April of 1968, when they with the garbage workers down there, and Dr. King being down there. Now, a lot of people, tend to forget that Dr. King, instead, more than just civil rights, he actually was for workers' rights, which is why, hospital workers, $11.99, they, hold them in high regard. That's why it's a paid holiday for $11.99 workers. So anyway, getting back to Memphis, is it possible, we're talking about with the garbage men in Memphis when they were all coming together, to try to get, and he was speaking to help them try to get better working rights, with everybody holding up the signs, or t-shirts, I am a man, because they wanted to be, treated decent. I mean, does that fall in line with what's happened in Chicago, you think?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and we talked upon that. We missed you last week, and so
I was traveling.
I know that's okay, but I'm saying is that's what we build upon when we talked about the aspect of why King was ultimately there, and that's that coalition building, not necessarily about race. See, here's the point. White people try to tell you it ain't about race, don't matter, but yet it ultimately does to them. If you are an African American or a Latino person or a queer person, you're trying to get the biggest tent as possible. And that's what King sought to do with union workers, poor whites, blacks, poor blacks, educated blacks, rural blacks, southern blacks, trying to get them all to be able to say, but those that were in the city in Memphis, to make sure that, wow, the company didn't want to pay for the insurance of I forgot the guy's name who died in the manufacturing not functioning. I'm trying to say malfunctioning. Excuse me, malfunctioning transfer. You know, that's what took place. They didn't even want to pay for his funeral. They didn't want to give the family any type of money, and that's what that sign says. I am a man. I'm a human being. Treat me like a human being. And so that's the point, is that when I'm saying, why are white people afraid of Black history? Because it reminds them that they treat Black people like they are not human beings. And what they want to do is escape and say, but that ain't me. But that was 1,000 years ago in that particular regard. Minister Young, you were ready? I hope you still got something.
We kind of moved on. I was just going to say something to your last point about the American Revolution. Just adding on to what you said about the wealthy, the American Revolution being about the wealthy holding on to their wealth, and that was wrapped up in the land, but it was also around their slaves as well.
Yes.
And I think it's one of the things we don't hear a lot about around the American Revolution is just how much of a role that did play in spearheading and really kind of inspiring the American Revolution to happen, was that they wanted to keep, not just have their liberty as the United States, but they wanted to keep their right to own slaves. And
in that, stay with me.
Part of what yep, go ahead.
No, I'm not going to interrupt you, but I want you to stay and hit this more with this hypocrisy of asking for freedom from England, but yet wishing to enslave at the same. They find no incongruity with those two things.
Right, exactly. And one of the interesting things about the American Revolution was that the British were able to kind of poke a hole in that, in the sense that they created a kind of like an offer where if you were a slave and you ran away and joined the British Army, that you would be counted as free. Absolutely. And so they started to really kind of bleed out some states of their slaves who wanted to be, obviously wanted to be free, and decided to take that risk. And so that was a huge reason, another reason why the American Revolution played out the way that it did.
Good stuff. Because I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm having fun. Arena?
Hi. So I put in the chat that teaching Black history has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not white people who are living today had anything to do with it in the wrong or in the right at all. Teaching Black history for understanding and learning it itself is its purpose, to understand the history of a people and why certain situations are the way that they are today. And I'm kind of tired of hearing that reasoning that Black history should not be taught because it makes white people feel bad, or that they have nothing to do with slavery. Some of them may have had something to do with Jim Crow, depending on how old they are, but it's not about casting blame. It's about learning about Black history for the sake of understanding Black history and knowing it. So the fact that that's being even brought up as a logical reason for someone not to learn something, to me is irrational. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a valid reason to not teach something like that.
Right. I like that.
I can't raise my hand. I don't know
Go
how.
ahead. But
I just want to say something because I feel like we missed part of it too. They don't want to also deal with, they owe us our reparations. If they look at the history, then they realize that there are people who are still owed, who would be able to trace their ancestral to, you owe me.
no, I like that. I like that. Wow. That's the second question. I'm gonna try still not to get to it yet, but Fanta, yours is a great bridge question or a bridge issue in there. Is that if I know I have done a wrong, how can I make it right? But once we start talking about reparations, it just shuts it down. You just a radical. You an idiot. I mean, it's like, just to think about it. But are you all aware that the slave owners when they lost their enslaved people, they got reparations. In Great Britain, when they canceled the slave trade in Europe, they paid the people. And same thing that happened in the United States of America. The slave owners were giving some type of restitution for what they gave up, but the slaves were not to give. The enslaved, is language matters. I'm trying to remind myself, but the enslaved were not entitled to something. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And because I come from a family who basically stayed on the land that they were slaves on. America's biggest deal was if they got families who they did have slaves to stay on their property, also got great tax benefits and their reparations for losing their slaves in their whole indentured servitude that continued on after that.
Yeah, which they called sharecropping. So
Sharecropping.
Yeah, that's what ultimately what it ended up being. But that's a big challenge there to look at when I find out, like, wow. I mean, just think about this. Think about this. If you're on an airplane and the person next to you, regardless of how nice they are, they got that little baby, and that baby throws up on you. Now, they say they're sorry, but if they're sorry, they say, I'll pay for your cleaning bill. Like, you're going to offer something or do something. Otherwise, just saying sorry isn't enough. And that's where we are right there. Is they're like, no, but we said sorry because it's not my parents. This happened 300 years ago. This is not something that we have done. And so when you're engaged in teaching these topics in school, now you got watch this, instead of little white girls and little white boys talking to little black girls and little black boys, you got little white girls and little white boys talking to their mom and say, did we kill Martin Luther the King? Did we? I mean, that I'm saying, I want you to see that aspect. Look what happened with the owner of the Cowboys, Jerry Jones. When we able to see a picture of him with a riot of those trying to go to Little Rock High School in Arkansas. And you know what? The technology exists now that you can find different people. So they want to hide that. They don't want to show their parents where they came. They don't want to show their children. These people in here that saying nigger this, nigger that, all of that stuff is recorded. We got the technology to find out who those people were. They're afraid of that. They don't want that stuff. Can we just start the game all over again? Lily. You muted, baby.
The worst part about it is that if white people acknowledge the fact that they owe Black people reparations, they're going to realize that they also owe Native Americans reparations. And in the end, they'll have to give back all that they've stole, which is something essentially they don't want to do because in their minds, they earned it. Right.
And what they said is, in their minds, it's a done deal. There's nothing we can do. It's baked in. We can't change it. What are we going to do? That's the point. Instead of wrestling with the pain that it has caused. And now you see, ironically, and this is where the civics gets involved in it, is that, thank you, Fanta, for pushing us in this direction. But in the United States of America hasn't done so. But in Evanston, they're working on reparation. In California, they're working on reparations in certain communities, returning back stolen property with a beach in California and a beach in Florida. They're seeking to try to do that in Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, being able, because they got the records of these people seizing stuff. And here's the point, I want to blow your mind, because many of us think this is stupid. And we think it's a frivolous activity. But the same thing happened with Germans when they took over and went after all these Jews. They took their land and they took their art. Right now, they're going after every person that has a piece of art that was stolen from a Jewish person. Yeah, are you all aware of that? Nod your head. That's what's going on. However, if we do it, we're being bitter. We're being bitter. Arena.
Oh, I was thinking about the questions that and the statements that people pose when they're opposed to repaying reparations, that they're asking the wrong questions. Instead of saying there's nothing we can do, the question is really, how can we fix it? How can we restore? What can we do to repair the past, the problems of the past, and how they persist today? Instead of just saying, oh, there's nothing we can do, or it's impossible, it's just too difficult to figure it out. Those are all just ways to evade what can actually be done, if the motivation is there. And the motivation clearly isn't there, because people are still trying to stall and avoid actually doing something about restoring justice from the problems and the injustice of the past.
Right. Good question. And now this the second question is linked to the first. And I like this. And I think this is more dangerous and deadly than the first. Why are Black people afraid of Black history?
Black people have a lot of internalized hate. Like, I've just been, when I think about in so many different ways, and then some Black people have just benefited from that, from the internalized hate, and benefited from white supremacy in different ways, or just figured out ways to maneuver within that sick, dysfunctional system. So that's why some Black people are afraid of that.
I like that you had said that. And when Deacon Beckwith had brought up the king woman, or woman king?
Woman king.
And so a lot of people were mad that it had the episode of Blacks selling Blacks into slavery. Africans said it happened. I mean, like, let's just be clear. It ain't like it's always clear, black and white, but there was some dealing that took place in there with that the Europeans were able to take advantage of. Does that excuse the European? No. But do we also have to deal with the poison that was taking place? Those things do happen, and we are afraid when we see that. And that's the part that I like what you have leaned to with that self-hatred, but yet to believe you have a self-entitlement without recognizing your own involvement in your own crime. Lily.
A big reason Black people are so afraid of Black history is because it doesn't start with the triangular trade. It doesn't start with slavery. And a lot of Black people have to be met with the fact that there's a huge possibility that they're never going to really know where they came from or who they come from. And it can be quite distressing, But I wanted to also go back to the fact that you mentioned how Black people were selling Black people to the slave trade. Black people were selling Black people with the assumption that it was indentured servantry, with the assumption that these Black people would be eventually given back after doing their due time. Most of these people who were given into the slave trade were criminals who were already doing indentured servantry in Africa. And if not for white people coming in and being like, oh, we'll give you this and this if you give us these people to do work over at our home, none of this would have ever happened.
I love your analysis is very, very well. That's how you have Australia. It's full of a whole bunch of criminals. And then the boat lift that happened from Cuba was Fidel Castro just opened up the prisons that took place in there. And that's what we said when you're trying to open up a broader perspective to begin to look at what's really going on. And guess what? Oftentimes, what they were selling was the other. They were selling enemies. They ain't selling themselves, they're selling enemies. Now, sometimes an enemy could be a woman if in a culture where women aren't valued, or sometimes it could be somebody that's left-handed, or it could be another tribe. It made no difference. But the point is that once you find out how people are divided, then you got your angle. When I know why you don't like this person, I know how to come at you. So they're able to come at you. And I love that, seeing that. But also, I would add to it, Lily, when you had said that period, because I think that sadly, when we talk about Black history, we limit it to the resurrection of the coming out of slavery, as if our history started in 1619, not beginning to look at the great history. And then if we do go into Africa, we act like Egypt is the only country in Africa. Egypt did some great things, but actually Egypt was primarily a quasi Asian Adriatic country, but the when Egypt at its greatness in the 25th, see, this is what you're going to learn how to do in the 25th dynasty. When the great stuff happened, it was controlled by Nubia. Those were the dark blacks. Those were lacy blacks, not y'all kind of blacks. Ain't nobody darker than me on here. The lacy blacks, those are darkies. And so when you look at that power, or look at the Dogon in West Africa, or look at the power of the Zimbabwe Empire. I mean, there's so much other stuff for us to be able to try to know, as opposed to just trying to go, oh, well, Egypt. I mean, and let me be clear. Egypt is the quintessential, but look how awesome that is, that I told you I can go from Egypt, I can go to which was Kemet, I can go to Nubia, I can go to Punt, I can go to Dogon in Nigeria, Malawi, and I can go down to Zimbabwe and Angola. Come on, South Africa, Shaka Zulu. I mean, those are those great empires to be able to know, as opposed to just saying Harriet Tubman freed the slaves and then starting your history there. It makes us accountable for our greatness. We are great people, and we came from somewhere. And now, how do we do that? And we don't want to, that's what why do we need a HBCU? Why we need the Black church? Think about this. Your wealthy do not do Black stuff. The people who we celebrate, they don't go to Black schools. They don't go to a Black church. I remember the wealthiest Black people that I knew in New York City, you know what church they attended?
Riverside?
Yes, you got it, baby. They went to Riverside. They didn't go to Abyssinia. They went to Riverside. Dick Parsons, all of them, Bill Graves, all of them, your top ebony elite in New York City to go to church, they went to Riverside Baptist Church. That's a white church. Got a lot of Black people in it, but that's a white church. Why do we do that?
For status or political power connections.
Okay. I like that. Anyone else? Go ahead, Fan. You muted.
I had to get to my Zoom. Mostly because I'm going to struggle with phrasing this properly. But with what white people, because it didn't just start with America, but the whole idolization of white. I want to be white. I want to look white. I want to be with white people because they are, it's a brainwashing thing that almost happens to us or people and minorities. It happens across the board. If you look at Asian, Langston, please. The Indians talk about how they have colorism because the fairer they are. It happens to all people that the Alexander's Great touched. Every continent, it becomes, I want to be white. How can I be white? Because it's all.
It does, but you hit on 2 points. I'm gonna come to the second one. I want to make sure I don't forget it. But the first one, it just hit me when you said I love Indian food, and I go to this Rajesh Indian food right down the street from me. It's go good, and the owner's darker than me, but nobody will ever call him Black. That's the point. He will never be confused primarily because of the hair. His hair ain't kinky, and that's the clue. But he's darker. They got to be the darkest man I know. But yet, you're right. We're in a culture where we're trying to ascribe to that. So being reminded, if again, white ICE is better. The white man is better. White schools are better. Now, again, I went to a historically Black college and I went to a predominantly white university. I did. And I mean, mine is not to throw shade on those who weren't able to do either or even both, but is a different, and neither one of my kids went to one, but I had them take a look to be able to see. It ain't about shaming it, being afraid of where we have come from on the aspect of those institutions. And we see this foolishness that has taken place with Coach Primetime, who, when he went to Jackson State, he was there and he drew a whole lot of attention, and folk got mad at him for leaving Jackson State, going to Colorado University. How many of us leave a smaller job to go to a bigger job? I think, how many of us leave a smaller church and go to a bigger church? Okay, it is real. And that's called mobility in that regard. It doesn't mean that you hate where you came from, but you got to learn how to the proper aspect of the nuance. Minister Young.
I just wanted to add also, you asked the question around, why are they worshiping in these spaces, like a Riverside, the most elite Black folk in New York City? Why do not attend, Black churches? And, to add on to what Fana said around, proximity to whiteness, that there's also just the truth that the Black church and white churches worship for, in some ways, different reasons, right? If you're going to a Black church, the core message there is going to be around giving Black people hope, going to be talking to Black folks who might be struggling economically or struggling health-wise, or the primary message is liberation. And I think there's a certain amount of separation that elite Black folk want to feel, just like white folks do. And so that to be worshiping in a place like that also puts you in the seat, and maybe would make you feel like either these are not your burdens, right? Like I don't have the same burdens as the average Black person in New York City. But it also allows you a certain amount of separation from that burden and responding to it.
Absolutely. I love that. And one of the things that with that, Nehemiah, is I believe our traffic system, our highway system lets us see that. That's called the bypass. The bypass is designed so that you don't have to pass through the city. You don't have to see the slum. You don't have to see the struggle. You can just go away from it. And that's what many of us want to be able to do. And if you start engaging in Black history, you can't take the bypass. You got to begin to see the pain that is in there. And that's the point. And sometimes, and let me be very, very clear, and I said before, I don't need to watch another slave movie. I know enough about it. I'm tired of watching. I didn't see Underground. I didn't see Harriet. I don't want to see that. I'm tired of watching those type of things. I mean, like, again, I remember I saw Roots. I only need to see Roots one time.
You still need to give them your coins, Pastor Lacy.
Do I? They don't tie it into Bethany. I want y'all to see that. Because see, I'm the same way. I need people's coins too. That's the point. But mine is that type of genre is not getting me. And by that same token, also, I like Blackish and with Kenya Barnes and with the stuff that he's doing. But I don't want to watch a show and have a lesson every time. So you can talk about I mean, my two favorite, I like Seinfeld and I like Big Bang Theory. Those are shows about nothing. When I watch television, I want to escape. I don't want to be reminded that I'm Black. I don't reminded that I'm poor. I don't reminded that churches and pastors got credibility issues. I don't want to be reminded of those. I watch that. I turn to PBS for that. It's called a documentary for me. Don't try to teach a lesson for me. Others, you can respond, but I'm saying is that's why some stay away from that. Tara Lynn, you chime in, and others come on.
Going back to the highway system, but there was also total disregard for the Black community when they took those roads right through the middle and displaced.
Absolutely. Look, I wasn't praising it. The point was it was designed for them not to be able to see it, to bypass it. And they took those lands by eminent domain, intimate domain that we talk about, which is a legally binding opportunity process by which the municipality can seize property. I believe probably about 80% of the time is taking Black and brown land for the good of others, but not for the good of Black and brown people.
They're doing it in Texas by trying to build that wall.
Yes. Taking people's property, being able to do that. So those are the concerns that we ultimately end up seeing. And that's when you begin to look at history. And the reason why I believe history is important, Black history is important, for us to begin to look and see different correlations. Because here we are right now, we're technically, if you were to do a graph or something, one would say, and certainly white folks have said, we peaked with Obama. And then since Obama's been president, we've been going back. That's what some people will say. And mine is, I can still take that marker for you to see, because since Obama's been president, it's been nothing but backlash. For you to replace Barack Obama with all the capable people in the United States of America with Donald J. Trump is crazy. That lets you know that an idiot could be there. And as if President Obama ruined the particular country. So that type of thing there for us to see that's what happened with the height when we had judges and sheriffs and right at the end of Reconstruction. But then by the time you get to the 1895, by the time you get there, it's all trying to be wiped out. It's the same thing. History is prologue. And I forgot who said it. If you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And that's where we are right now. We're in a repeating cycle. So it's important to be able to see these things, but not only just in the United States, but to begin to look even in our Black history. We stay in the United States or just go to Egypt. Our history is well beyond all of those things. I mean, you have you can look at Cush, you can look at Malik Ambar. That's an African king in India. You never heard of him. I know you haven't, because I just learned of him. Malik Ambar. You also got looking at Black and brown faces in medieval art. You got Saint Dominique, with his particular story with the revolutions. And again, I said, you got the ruins, and actually had white folks plundered Great Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia. When they could not have it, they sought to destroy it. So you ask yourself, when you look at the Sphinx, why was the Sphinx disfigured? That's because Napoleon looked at it and hated the Africoid features and started destroying the nose and the eyes. Those are those things. Those are real things. And me telling somebody that don't make me hate white people. It's just, these are just facts. That somebody came in here and they disfigured this because they didn't like what it looked like. And what it looked like me. look like me. So I only did 2 questions. I said, I'm not until y'all go, unless y'all going deeper, I'm just doing an hour and I'm good. Questions, comments, observations, 7:58.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned a lot of the African countries and everything, but I mean, it also you can think about it over in this side of the world, in particular, the island that's 90 miles south of Florida, Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of colorism there too.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely. Well, I mean, when we deal with that, I'm gonna look to take this deeper when we get into Black History Month, but we'll just tease into it. But when Philip the Navigator, when they really, I mean, again, when you drop my book out, my books that I read, the color, Frances Cress Welsing, when she talks about this aspect of colorism that does takes place, and she gets into gene therapy. Problem is, when you said what it ain't even like white people are afraid of Black history, they're afraid of Black because white is recessive. It is a recessive gene. You know when that baby daddy is Black. I mean, now some people like having a lighter child and having complexion, and whether or not you Puerto Rican or Dominican, you still Black. It's in there. We can tell that gene is strong. That seed is strong. And in that regard, that's the other thing about Roe v. Wade. I mean, it's like trying to make sure white women don't get rid of white babies. Or you have a whole bunch of Patrick Mahomes and Derek Jeters. Nehemiah.
You're hilarious. So yeah, and another reason.
Okay,
add it on. You got one more?
It's a whole bunch of them. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Another reason, white folks will say that teaching Black history or teaching about race or even critically thinking about race causes Black people to hate white people. But even more so than that, I think they know that really looking at Black history makes white people hate white people, or the shame around being white. And one of the reasons why I know this is true is because I growing up, I attended a pretty much all white private school where I was one of 2 Black girls graduating in my senior class. And maybe a year ago or so, we got together and we were talking about how there had been a recent event at that school where the parents were in discussion with leadership around the history lessons that were being taught around African American history and specifically race. And one of the reasons that they cited was that some of their kids were coming home feeling ashamed. And it was just we had a very interesting conversation around the lengths that people will go around protecting white children's identity and protecting the potential shame they may feel around whiteness, because that also challenges white supremacy. When your own children start, like you said, start to question you, but also start to question the validity of their own race. And in private schools, it's easier for them to control that. What's really dangerous is when we see it happening as state laws and in public schools as well.
And you're right. I love what you're saying that. And my kids been in same type of situation. And I love, we do the same thing. When your kid come home and they say they want to go to the movies with somebody, and we ask, you try to find a way to ask, is she white? Is he Black? We're right about it, y'all. We do. And you know what our kids say? Does it matter? And that's the point. That's the problem that this generation has had. So they're trying to block these kids because these kids have been exposed to so much. They're like, well, what's wrong? I mean, it's like, does it really matter? And that's the point. I really do believe if I prepare for you, I'll be ready to sing. I believe the children are a future. I mean, Randy King. I mean, but that really is it at bottom. Our kids are more open. They're open to different races. They're open to queerness. They're open to they're open to people with disabilities who sign, or those that are blind. They're more open until you train them not to be. That's what the problem that what his whole bill, even though it started in high school. Remember, not only did he did that, he banned almost 2,000 books. When you starting to ban books, this is it, because you don't want people to know. You don't want people to know what's going on. I mean, I remember as a child in high school. I mean, in elementary school. What was the book that you were supposed to read in elementary school that you technically weren't supposed to read? That was the book. Those of you all who are 50 and under.
Cliff Notes.
Not Cliff Notes.
What?
Are
Spark
you there,
Notes?
God? It's me, Margaret.
Oh.
Y'all remember that? Fanta does. So Nehemiah, you a little bit younger, but that's what it was. It is about a girl getting her period. So it talks about sex. We were told not to go to get the book, so everybody wanted to go get the book. And that's what's happening when they're banning all these books. Every book that this guy has put on the list, they're now selling out more. But it is foolish for us to be in a culture right now. But again, this guy has a great chance to be president of the United States because he's Trump light. He is Trump, but he's Trump LITE in that regard. And I hope Trump is petty enough to destroy him, because he's trying to play footsie with this moron and to be able to go forth in there. So, but yeah, so I love it. We had 2 questions. We had 2 more, but I'm going to stop and we can deal with these next time. Next week, we're going to deal, and I'll do more with the immigration, because I want to have some facts and show you some things about our border crisis and the role that America plays in destabilizing Latin American countries and others. And to talk really about something real deep for us in a real serious conversation. Why is New York City a sanctuary city? And what does that mean? And what does that require of us? And do we still want to be? Because that's the point. Do you still want to be a sanctuary city? I mean, it's a very, very legitimate question. That's what I want to get into next week, if all minds are in order. I mean, if we want to stay on these same topics, I can stay longer, or I will stay longer. But if not, we can go for it, because it's my same crew, and I thank my crew for participating. But I told you, if you want me to stay longer, I want a greater round of participation. Otherwise, I'll just lecture, and I don't lecture for 90 minutes. Y'all good? All right. All hearts being in mind. Deacon Beckwith, can you close us in prayer, sir?
Okay, let us unite in prayer. Eternal God, we thank you for this time that you've allotted for us to discuss, dissect, and really get into these issues here. We know, Lord, that there are challenges. There are challenges with the past, challenges with the future. But we know that through all of it, past, present, and future, you're there. You're there to guide us. You're there to help us. You're there to protect us. And we just ask that you continue to protect us and keep us walking in the light. Now, Lord, we ask that you dismiss us from this virtual space, but never from your presence. In the name of Jesus, we ask it all. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you all for tuning in.
Amen.